To anyone looking in from the outside, Katrina Smith had built exactly the kind of life people dream about. A loving husband, a comfortable home, a tight-knit family, a community that adored her. And on the morning of October 23rd, 2012, she was on the verge of something new, a job interview that could open a whole new chapter. She never made it there. And when the people who loved her most started asking questions, the answers they found were nothing like what they expected. Machesney Park, Illinois, a quiet suburb just north of Rockford, the kind of small town where everyone knows their neighbors, where people still wave from their front porches and look out for each other. This is where Katrina grew up, along with her younger sister Miranda and her brother Chad, after their parents' divorce. Miranda was 8 years younger than Katrina, but the age gap never put distance between them. From the time they were kids, those two were inseparable, close in a way that only deepened as they got older. People who knew Katrina described her the same way, every time, without hesitation. Warm, generous, full of life. She loved the holidays more than almost anything, not because of what she'd receive, but because of what she could give. She was the kind of person who would take a tiny little gift, something small enough to fit in the palm of your hand, and wrap it inside 12 different boxes, just to make the moment last longer, just to see someone's face light up. She had been part of her local church since she was a little girl, and that wasn't just a Sunday thing for her. She genuinely wanted to help people, not just the ones close to her, but anyone she came across. When Katrina was 20 years old, she met the man she thought she'd spend the rest of her life with. His name was Todd Smith. He was a financial guy, already established in his career, with 3 young daughters from a previous relationship. They met at a bar. Todd had his own business. He worked from home, which meant the two of them had the kind of flexibility most couples never get. They could travel. They could build something together. After 3 years together, they had a modest, intimate wedding. Katrina was happy. Todd seemed like a great guy with a great life. They loved each other. By all appearances, it was a good marriage. 7 years in, they tried to adopt a child. It never came together. But on the surface, things looked steady. That surface was hiding a lot. October 23rd, 2012. 5 o'clock in the morning.
911, what's your emergency?
My wife is supposed to be house-sitting for some friends while they're away, and I can't get a hold of her.
You can't reach your wife?
That's right.
What's her name?
Katrina.
Todd told police that after he couldn't get Katrina on the phone, he drove over to the house she was supposedly watching, and she wasn't there. He filed a missing persons report immediately. Katrina Smith was not the kind of woman who just vanished. She was responsible, dependable, always at work, always reachable, always where she said she'd be. The people who knew her couldn't make sense of it. After he made the report, Todd called Miranda. He asked if she'd spoken to her sister. She said no, and then asked what was wrong. Todd broke down crying. He told her Katrina hadn't shown up for work, and he had no idea where she was. Miranda felt something drop inside her the moment those words left his mouth. She knew something had happened. Katrina would never miss work without calling. Not in a million years. Her brother Chad was at a military training exercise in Oklahoma when Miranda reached him. She was crying so hard she could barely get the words out. Katrina hadn't come home. She might be missing. Nobody knew where she was. Chad didn't ask a lot of questions. He booked a flight home. That same evening, a local resident called 911 about an abandoned vehicle near the Rock River.
Police, can I report an abandoned car?
What's the issue exactly?
I'm not entirely sure. It was already there when I left this morning. And I mean on our property, not just on the shoulder. It looks like someone left it in a hurry.
Officers ran the plates on the Chevrolet Cruze. It came back registered to Katrina Smith. Detectives immediately understood something was very wrong. The car was practically new, and by all accounts, Katrina loved it. She would never just leave it on the side of a road. This wasn't a car breakdown. This was something else. Miranda grabbed her things and raced to Todd's house. By the time she got there, he'd already been notified that the car had been found. He told her police had asked him to come identify the vehicle, and Miranda told him she was coming with him. When they arrived, there were cruisers everywhere. Police separated them right away, wanted to talk to each of them individually before letting them near the car. Miranda later described the moment she saw Katrina's car sitting in that ditch. It felt like something inside her just broke. No signs of a struggle inside the vehicle. Nothing to explain how it got there. Katrina's mother was devastated and completely confused. Her daughter had no reason to be in that part of town. She had never been out there in her life. The only explanation that made any sense to her was the worst one: that someone had taken her, that someone had hurt her. Late that same night, around 11 p.m., detectives pulled Todd into the precinct to reconstruct the evening. He walked them through it. Katrina had been house-sitting for friends. Around 5:30 in the afternoon, she had stopped by the house to throw some laundry in. She had a job interview first thing the next morning and wanted to be prepared. That evening, she drove to a mall to pick up a few things to wear. She came back home with her purchases, then told Todd she still needed to grab a couple more things. Detectives pinpointed that second departure at approximately 8:30 p.m. Before she left, Katrina told Todd that once she finished her errands, she'd head over to the house she was watching and spend the night there. That was the last time anyone saw her. Her car turned up in an area she had absolutely no reason to be in. No signs of violence inside. A 30-year-old woman had walked out of her house on a Monday evening to run a quick errand and had never come back. And Todd, in front of cameras, was already making public statements.
Horrible. I just wanted to come home.
The search operation moved quickly. Volunteers from surrounding neighborhoods flooded the park near where the car was found. Chad, drawing on his military training the moment he landed, took command of the search team. He divided the territory into sectors, marked them on a map, and assigned groups to each zone. They combed through that park for hours. At the same time, Katrina's mother was out on the streets, taping flyers with her daughter's photo to telephone poles, gas station windows, storefront doors. She couldn't bring herself to join the physical search. She just needed to do something. And then searchers started finding things. Katrina's wallet, on the ground, and continuing outward from the car, more of her belongings, scattered as if someone had been dropping them deliberately, one by one, along a path. Then her phone, then several towels, with blood on them. For the family, this was the moment hope started to fracture. They understood now that something terrible had happened to Katrina Smith. Meanwhile, a woman came forward to detectives. She had been driving across the bridge near where Katrina's car was found late on the night of the disappearance. In the middle of that bridge, she had seen a blue car, matching Katrina's Chevy Cruze. The trunk was open. Someone was kneeling behind it. She couldn't make out a face, but she got the impression it was a man. She had assumed car trouble and kept driving. Investigators immediately checked for any roadside assistance calls or breakdowns reported on that bridge that night. There were none. The car had been found yards from that same bridge. Detectives began to suspect that Katrina was somewhere in the Rock River, but they had no body, no proof. Standard procedure in a missing persons case is to look at everybody. Family, friends, co-workers. Everyone gets examined. Everyone's alibi gets checked. That includes the husband. Todd visibly looked rough during those early days. He kept repeating the same phrase.
I'm just hoping she comes home.
Everyone was suffering, but detectives noticed that Todd seemed to be carrying something heavier than grief alone. But before they got too far down that road, a new lead emerged. Katrina had apparently mentioned to friends that there was a teenage boy from her church who had become obsessed with her. He had followed her, watched her movements. There were even suggestions he had gotten inside her house at some point. It had scared her. He was a person of interest. But investigators tracked him down quickly. He was enrolled at a university near Rockford. His roommates confirmed he'd been in the dormitory the entire evening. Katrina disappeared. His alibi was airtight. He was crossed off the list. Then detectives turned to her phone. A phone is a window into a person's life that they never expect anyone else to look through. And Katrina's phone told a story nobody in her inner circle had any idea about. For the past month, Katrina Smith, who worked as an HR coordinator at a local parts manufacturing company, had been in a secret relationship with a coworker named Guy Gabriel. The two had been colleagues for some time before they went out to a bar after work one evening, started talking about their lives, and something shifted. What started as friendship turned into something more. Fast. In the most recent messages, Guy had been actively encouraging Katrina to leave her marriage. Detectives dug into Guy Gabriel's background. What they found changed the direction of the investigation. He had a history of domestic violence. He shot to the top of the suspect list. He was brought in and questioned, nervous from the moment he sat down, like a man who wanted to be anywhere else in the world. He admitted to the relationship, but denied any involvement in Katrina's disappearance. He said he was at work the night she vanished. Investigators pulled his time card. He was in the building. His alibi held. Guy Gabriel was eliminated as a suspect. But before detectives could fully move on, Guy said something that stopped them in their tracks. He told them the real reason he had been pushing Katrina to leave her husband was for her own protection. According to Guy, Todd was controlling, obsessively so. He monitored Katrina's every movement. He dictated her life. When detectives asked Todd directly whether he and Katrina had been having problems, whether divorce had ever been on the table, Todd said everything was fine. They were happy. But the investigation was telling a very different story. Detectives confirmed that Katrina had been telling close friends she wanted to leave Todd. More than that, they discovered she had met with a divorce attorney the day before she disappeared. The house she was supposedly just watching for friends. She had actually moved her things in there. She and Todd were already separated. She wasn't house-sitting. She was living there because she had left him. This reframing of the marriage put a new lens on something that had happened weeks earlier at Katrina and Guy's workplace. Around midday, a black Volkswagen Jetta had pulled into the company parking lot. The driver, wearing a mask, had opened the sunroof and hurled a stack of papers out onto the pavement, right where employees were standing. Nearly 200 homemade flyers. Every single one of them carried a degrading message about Katrina and Guy's relationship, designed to humiliate her in front of her entire workplace. Katrina's friends were certain nobody in her social circle drove a black Volkswagen Jetta. Around the same time, Katrina had been telling people she was frightened. She confided in her hairdresser that she feared for her life and was seriously considering purchasing a firearm. She had walked into a cell phone store to ask whether it was possible for someone to track her location through her phone. She didn't know who was watching her, but she knew someone was. She was right. She just didn't know the full picture yet. Police started calling car dealerships in the area, asking about black Volkswagen Jettas. They found one, still on the lot, still for sale. When they spoke with the manager and asked to look at the test drive records from the week of the flyer incident, he brought out a thick stack of photocopied driver's licenses and began working through them one by one. Near the bottom of the stack, he stopped. Todd Smith. He had test-driven that exact black Volkswagen Jetta. During the same week, those flyers were thrown onto his wife's workplace parking lot. Chad and Miranda were brought into the precinct. Detectives sat them down and told them directly. Todd Smith was now the primary suspect in their sister's murder. Miranda's first instinct was disbelief, not because she hadn't wondered, but because accepting it meant accepting everything that came with it. She said later that it felt like watching a movie that couldn't possibly be real life. And then she admitted something harder. Deep down, some part of her had already known. She had known and had been forcing herself not to look at it directly. But detectives needed to keep Todd in the dark for now. They couldn't tip him off, couldn't let him run. So Miranda and Chad did something incredibly painful. They kept their composure, kept up appearances, kept communicating with him normally while feeding information to the investigators.
I got sick to my stomach. I never in a million years thought it would be Todd. But it was him. It turned out to be him.
Piece by piece, the picture of Todd Smith's supposedly perfect life began to fall apart. His investment company was being sued. He was drowning in financial problems that he'd kept completely hidden from Katrina's family. More critically, Katrina had become the primary breadwinner in the household. If she left him, if they divorced, he would lose everything. Not just his wife. The money, the house, the stability, all of it. Police obtained a search warrant for the Smith residence. If the last confirmed sighting of Katrina was at that house on the night she disappeared, then every inch of it needed to be processed. In the garage, investigators noticed something in the corner, a baseball bat, and on it, what appeared to be dried blood. They already knew from the autopsy that Katrina had been killed by repeated blunt force trauma. DNA testing confirmed it. The blood on that bat was Katrina's. And there was more. Underneath the car in the garage, luminol, the compound forensic teams use to detect blood even after someone tries to clean it, lit up. Someone had made an effort to scrub that floor. Not well enough. The garage was where it had happened. And then there was the GPS tracker. Investigators had found a tracking device mounted underneath Katrina's Chevy Cruze. Todd had been monitoring his wife's every move, not through her phone, but through that device hidden on her car. Forensic analysts examined Todd's computers and found software for reading the tracker data. They pulled his location history and confirmed he had been following her. Everywhere she went, he went too. But here's where the evidence became extraordinary. On the night Katrina was killed, Todd had removed the tracker from her car, presumably after he killed her and left the vehicle in the ditch. He pocketed the device. But at some point on his walk back home, while he was dropping her belongings along the route, piece by piece, the wallet, the phone, the bloody towels, the tracker accidentally switched back on in his pocket, and it recorded his path. Every step of the way home. A digital breadcrumb trail, mapped in real time, connecting Todd Smith to the scene of his wife's death. Detectives brought Todd into the interrogation room. They laid out what they had: the tracker data, the bat, the blood, the car dealership record, all of it. Todd sat there and stared down at the table. For a moment, investigators thought he might confess. Instead, he collected himself. He stood up. He shoved the chair back and raised his voice.
I want to speak to a lawyer. I need a lawyer. Now.
It was the first time anyone had seen that side of Todd Smith. Not the quiet, composed, grief-stricken husband. Someone else entirely. 30 days after Katrina Smith was last seen alive, Todd Smith was arrested and charged with her murder. 18 days after Katrina disappeared, a firefighter from the city of Byron was out fishing on the Rock River near Winnebago. He spotted something snagged against a log in the water. He paddled closer. It was a body. Firefighters recovered it from the river. Once on shore, they could see it was a woman, but her identity couldn't be confirmed on site. The level of decomposition indicated she had been in the water for well over a week. The remains were transported for forensic examination. Dental records were obtained. The forensic odontologist made the comparison. It was Katrina Smith. The autopsy confirmed what the bat had already told them. She had been struck with a blunt object multiple times with tremendous force. She had been beaten to death. From that point forward, this was a homicide investigation. The hardest part isn't even losing someone you love. Losing people you love is always devastating. What I can't bear is how she was killed. How someone did that to her. That's what I can't get past. Reconstructing the events of that final night, investigators and prosecutors pieced it together like this. The evening before she disappeared, Katrina had sat across from a divorce attorney and begun the process of formally ending her marriage. The following evening, October 22, 2012, she went back to the house she shared with Todd to collect some of her things before her job interview the next morning. At some point during that visit, she told him it was over. She told him she was leaving. She turned to walk out, and Todd picked up the baseball bat from the corner of the garage. He beat her. He killed her. He loaded her body into the car, drove to the bridge, and threw her into the Rock River. He left the car in the ditch, and he walked home, dropping her belongings in the darkness as he went, completely unaware that the GPS tracker in his pocket was mapping his route. Katrina had known she was in danger. She had told people she was being watched. She had asked about weapons for self-defense. She had gone to the phone store to ask if someone was tracking her. She had done everything she could to protect herself. Todd had been controlling Katrina from the day they got married, controlling her finances, her movements, her life. And in his mind, apparently, there was only one way she could ever stop being his wife. January 11th, 2017. The trial was long and brutal. Katrina's family sat in that courtroom and heard details for the first time. Things they had never known. Things they wished they could unhear. Images that will never leave them. The jury didn't deliberate for long. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of murder in the first degree. When that verdict was read, Katrina's family said they felt something release inside them. Not happiness, not closure exactly, but a kind of peace, knowing that the man who had destroyed their sister, their daughter, their friend, would be held accountable, that he wouldn't be able to do this to anyone else. Todd Smith was sentenced to 59 years in prison for the murder of his wife. Cases like this one stay with you. When you work a homicide, you try to maintain your objectivity. You have to. But it's impossible not to feel it. Impossible not to think about who this person was. A woman who wrapped tiny gifts in 12 boxes just to make someone smile. A woman who wanted to help every person she encountered. A woman who was trying, quietly and bravely, to take her life back. The job is to find the truth, to give the family answers, to make sure the person responsible faces what they've done. And in this case, that's exactly what happened. But the weight of it, that doesn't go away when the gavel comes down.